And now I'm going to turn it over to the judges.
Welcome, Wyoming Wildcard. Congratulations to you for making it to the national finals. I don't know if you realize how significant that honor is, but it is a great comment with regard to your hard work these 2 semesters, and also the hard work of your teacher. I wish you the very best in the competition, but I want to let you know that I'm very proud of you for even being here in the first place. As we are to be your judges, you should know who we are. I am Edward Volpe, an attorney from Denver, Colorado. I've been with this program for many, many years.
Hi students, I'm Caitlin Johnston. I am an attorney in New York City, and I am a We the People alum. I did this when I was in high school in Indiana, but I never made it to nationals. So you've already beat me, and I'm very much looking forward to your presentation. Hope you don't mind if I stand through it, and best of luck.
Good afternoon, Wyoming. I'm Ed Murphy. I'm a Superior Court judge in Tacoma, Washington. And I also want to congratulate you on making it to the Nationals, and I look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you.
If the students would introduce themselves, please.
Hi, I'm Levi Peterson. I'm a senior here at Green River High School.
I'm Jessica Petrie, and I'm also a senior at Green River High School.
My name is Jared Lestensko, and I'm also a senior at Green River High School.
Welcome to you all. Let's get right to your question. As you know, it is question 2 today. I will read it to you and we'll get started. A Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth, general or particular, and what no just government should refuse or wrest on entrance. Do you agree or disagree with Thomas Jefferson? What are the advantages and disadvantages of a national Bill of Rights as compared to state bills of rights? What are the differences between positive and negative rights, and which are more important to the preservation of liberty? You may begin.
The Bill of Rights is a list of rights that people are entitled to. It's not simply an American ideal. Different governments controlling different areas can assign particular rights for their people, all of which can be considered a different type of Bill of Rights.
Most of the time, we see these declarations of rights promoting the fundamental values of the people who are governed by that Bill of Rights.
A Bill of Rights needs to be a very stable representation of the fundamental values of a nation, and these nations should not diverge from the documents when governing.
The balance between the moral fluidity and political stability is the job of the government in the recognition of all rights.
Fortunately, we do have a global organization that established the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was an attempt at establishing what natural human rights are. But the UN lacks the ability to enforce their ideas, which makes the document functionally useless.
Now, every government should guarantee certain unalienable rights to its citizens through a Bill of Rights, preferably written with the opinions and cultures of the people in mind.
Often we see that some governments are not willing to give people rights, and this is mostly because of corruption and corporate influence.
In fact, a lot of time corrupt nations do have bills of rights, but so much of the United Nations, the rights are not really protected, or they use wording that allows a politician to grow their power by manipulating the wording and looking for loopholes in the document.
A national Bill of Rights is overwhelmingly useful. A nation needs a sense of unity, and fortunately, the unity of our nation is provided through a national Bill of Rights.
This also allows people to move between states and still retain similar rights.
Potential drawback to a national Bill of Rights is that because the country is so expansive, there are many different cultural differences in any part of the country that may require different rights or ideals.
But most importantly, Americans are citizens of the United States before they are citizens of their individual states.
The individual rights of the people must first be protected on a large scale through the national rights, and small cultural differences can be worked out under the frame of the state's individual bills of rights.
It would seem that the federal government should be able to guarantee the most basic of human rights and leave the states to decide what would be necessary to live in their respective states.
If the reverse was the standard, then we would have a situation eerily similar to that of the United States under the Articles of Confederation.
During that time, the individual states held priority over the federal government, so there was no real unity amongst the country as a whole. We know how well that particular system worked out for the country. So we know that having a central Bill of Rights is beneficial for the nation as a whole.
But we recognize having too strong of a central government could infringe on people's rights. That is the purpose of positive and negative rights.
A positive right is a right that is actively provided to a person or group, such as the right to vote, because the government has to actively facilitate your voting. A negative right, on the other hand, forbids action from the government, such as those found in the Bill of Rights.
One of the biggest debates right now in regards to negative and positive rights in the United States is with healthcare.
Folks in favor of a government-managed healthcare program are in favor of healthcare becoming more of a positive right, whereas your right to buy healthcare would be a negative right if the government did not prevent you from getting it.
Positive and negative rights work hand in hand to protect against the degradations of freedom.
Negative rights work to protect you from the established governments, whereas positive rights protect you more often from people.
Negative rights do allow us to tell the government to step away, but sometimes it's necessary for the government to step in.
In order to secure any sense of liberty, both positive and negative rights must be recognized.
However, liberty at its core is the idea of no interference with individual lives of citizens of a particular government. And this is exactly how negative rights work.
If we think in a world of absolutes and a government provided only positive rights, liberty would not exist. You would have things like roads and would be able to vote, but no freedom.
If we only recognize negative rights, you would still have liberty to do as you want, but no socialistic benefits.
Well, you have talked about positive and negative rights. Can limitations be placed upon the rights of individuals, such as in the First Amendment, we recognize the right of freedom of speech. Can that be limited by either state or federal governments?
Yes, and we actually do see it limited through different court cases that have put into place, say if you were causing or encouraging violence of individuals.
We establish that balance through things that are degrading other people's rights. For example, your limited of your freedom of speech is based on if your freedom of speech is infringing on other people's rights. They don't limit it simply based on, we don't like it when you say you don't like cats. But if you were to say something that hurts another person or another being, then that would be something that would be disconsidered because it hurts their rights.
Great. And just a reminder, please put your notes away for this part. Thank you very much. And I will go into my question, which is what circumstances, if any, would cause a person to lose the rights that they have under the Bill of Rights or elsewhere in the Constitution? How could we lose those rights?
Like in the previous question, we stated that people may lose their rights to freedom of speech if they were, say, inciting violence or harming another person's rights through their speech or conduct.
Whether this is correct or not, in the current system, also felons lose certain rights, like the right to vote. And that's debatable whether they should or shouldn't, whether the Constitution would protect that, but that's an example of something right now that qualifies losing your rights.
Do you know what the policy is in your state, or can you tell me where this panel comes out on whether felons should lose their right to vote?
I personally don't think that felons should lose their right to vote because they are still a citizen, and just because they did something, whether or not that should be a felony is up for debate as well. And if they're not still given a voice in government, they can't voice whether they think that was justified. And beyond there, it's disproportionately disenfranchising minority voters as well.
And this is true along because of the fact when we have a way, our system to allow individuals to choose whether particular individuals are allowed to vote or not, or by say giving them a felony charge. If we see higher average felony charges given out to a certain demographic of people, we could see that as a marginal assumption towards voter suppression of that individual group, even if it is unintentional or we just have this tendency.
Yeah, it stands as a rather arbitrary barrier saying that felons don't deserve the right to vote, but really, why not all criminals at that point or all people who commit a crime? It's just a form of disenfranchisement, so we don't support that.
Thank you.
What is the difference, if any, between rights that are added through the amendment process and those that are established by a court decision?
A lot of the amendment processes and the amendments that we do have, those are the underlying bases of our laws or like of our rights. And what we see is the expansion or the definitions of those rights put in play through these court cases, because we can't have every situation or every detail put out into these rights. We need to kind of establish the general idea of what we want and then put it out into the world for it to be molded into what it should be and is decided on based by case basis.
Typically, the amendments that are made are the basis for the court cases. So that would be how that connection would be made.
To what extent can positive and negative rights conflict with each other? I'm thinking in terms of the military draft in times of national crisis.
Absolutely. So negative and positive rights are almost always in conflict with each other, which is why this is something that we're talking about today. But especially in terms of the draft saying that a person has a right to not be and a person has a right to have their country protected, this would be something that we would have to debate and go over, like what a constitutional analysis would be for should we be given the right to do this, or should this be something that we have to do for the greater good of the society?
And along with that, we see on those individual court type bases, say if the United States was being actively invaded, that might be a different situation to a war in which has low approval ratings. You know, these are things that make court cases important to the evolution of American democracy and American policy.
So what right, positive or negative, should be in the Bill of Rights that isn't?
I like that currently we only have negative rights, things that the government can't be doing or inflicting upon people in the Bill of Rights. I think that that is something that is a good place to base a lot of our court decisions and a lot of our laws on, is what the government is not allowed to do and then work around through the rights of the people put in place initially.
I think that the discussion we had earlier about voter disenfranchisement could be something that could be fixed along the lines of having these rights. Like the government cannot take away your right to vote with any means, such as if you become a felon or any place that you are trying to vote in not being available. That could be a right provided.
What responsibilities go along with the rights of citizens? So we've talked about rights, but what responsibilities do citizens have?
Yeah, so once the government gives a person rights, it kind of comes into the play of a social contract. So if the government's going to give you rights to not have infringed upon or rights to positive rights in certain things, then this would be kind of signing a social contract saying that you're going to obey these laws, and if not, accept the punishment that society will give you based on this. Now, whether that's right in all situations would be up for debate as well. But what we see within our government, the American government, is that the system is working correctly.
To go off of what Jessica said, with the possible social contract is that the government is giving you these particular rights that you may need to do things in return, such as follow the laws and pay taxes.
You've talked about the division of power between the federal Bill of Rights and the state bills of rights. Can states legalize something that would otherwise be a federal crime?
I believe, like, we already see this through the legalization of marijuana, where it is technically still a federal crime, but it is really just the enforcement of that that truly creates the legitimacy of those laws.
Can the federal government force the states to enforce it?
Their individual laws or the laws of federally?
Federal law.
The federal government, I don't believe, has the power to require states to do this. They can put sanctions on them and say, for example, we're not going to give you funding for your roads if you don't obey this law. But there's no way, like, written out in the Constitution for them to say you can't be a state if you don't obey the federal regulations. So it would be more of a contract between, we'll punish you in some sort of way if you don't listen to us, but it's still your choice, but not really.
Time.
I enjoyed your presentation. I think it reflects the fact that you have gained an excellent body of knowledge with regard to this very, very important subject area: bills of rights, negative rights, positive rights, individual freedoms, and you did reference common good in response to my question. Do we have a duty to serve our community in addition to exercising our private rights. And you did mention healthcare, which I think is an excellent question for today's world. Do we owe the lesser privileged people some healthcare with respect to their everyday life? I thought that you did a good job on talking about the removal of the power to vote with regard to felons, but then you referred to ethnic bias, which I think is a societal problem and does address whether or not rights are equal among our citizens. The idea that of whether or not it exists on an international basis, I thought you handled that very well. Of course, we do have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but there's almost no way to enforce that. There is a procedure whereby a country can appear before the International Criminal Court, which is part of the United Nations, and they can be sanctioned by the International Criminal Court. But by and large, the enforcement of fundamental rights is left to the individual countries. And the United States is a good example of those who have concentrated upon that. As we have talked in prior sessions, one of the reasons we became a nation and are not part of the British Empire is the fact that our citizens' rights were being abused. There are 27 individual complaints in the Declaration of Independence, which said, we are leaving you, Great Britain. We are going to become our own nation. And it's because you have abused our citizens. So I think that is an interesting point of history. I think you dealt very well with the fact that the basic protection is divided between federal and state, and it can lead to conflict, as you pointed out. But that's enough for me this afternoon. I will ask our fellow judges to jump in with their comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. That was great. It was wonderful to engage with you and hear both your demonstration of what you've learned and also your opinions. When I asked the question, I was thinking about voting rights for felons. So Jessica, you went right to that. And so that's why I turned it into an opinion follow-up question to see how well you could advocate for a position. This is a nice extension to, don't just tell us what the answer is to the factual question, but maybe try to put some advocacy on it. So you did a good job while I was leading you through that. You got towards the end on another question, you got to the social contract, which if you commit a crime, you lose a lot of freedoms. It will put you in jail. So that was kind of where I was going, but the right to vote is obviously top of mind these days. So I was glad to hear that. And I can't remember, somebody wrapped up to my beat the buzzer question with, well, the federal government can just withhold money. And that is the real sword there, which was, you are showing your knowledge of American government and politics. So it was great to talk with you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would echo what my fellow judges have said. This is a difficult question because it doesn't focus on one specific amendment. It doesn't focus on one specific area of an amendment where you can kind of demonstrate your knowledge of cases that deal with that one particular issue. This is very broad, and you have to get into some philosophy and some thoughts about that. And I did appreciate you engaging in that and giving us some of your thoughts and opinions, taking positions, defending those positions. That's very important. And kind of playing off each other. If somebody answers something and then adding to that, that's also very important through these competitions as you work together as a team. So very well done. I would encourage you to continue with your learning in this area. You already know more than most people in this country about the Constitution and civics. And so continue to grow that, nurture it, keep it active, and educate others, because this is something we cannot lose or we'll lose our country. So I really appreciate you taking the time and the efforts of your teachers as well in working with you on this. So very well done. Keep up the good work, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.